your brain is built to make connections. Everything we do, everywhere we go, we are building connections. When we talk to somebody on the street or in our family, we are listening to a story. I told you to tell a story beforehand. We are listening to the story, and then as that's going, we're thinking about all the ways that something like that has happened to me. Now, you could read that as a bit of an ego situation, but we're going to step aside from that for a moment and just look at how quickly and readily we make connections between people. I've been thinking a lot about how we build connections beyond our own family. So in this culture, in this day, our lives are connected across the globe. How many of you have family outside of Canada? More than half. How about outside of North America? Still about half. How about outside of the West? A few. So the world is coming closer and closer together, and a few hundred years ago that was nearly impossible to have that conversation and to be thinking about how connected we are across the globe. But we think about the world and we have this cool thing called the internet, the web. Have you seen this? We actually can look up anything anywhere. So my son asked me this week, what did he say? He asked me, I said, what do you want to learn about? Let's do it right now. Anything and everything. Teeth. Okay. So guess what? I get to wiki teeth and read all about how teeth grow and where they come from and how much harder they are than bones and all kinds of weird stuff, because we are connected across the globe. What if we want to learn about a people across the globe? Wiki the people, right? It is that easy. And not only that, then we have news stories that are coming from news sources outside of our community, outside of our country, outside of North America, and we can read about things happening right now all across the globe. This broadens our connection to people. So when we read we spent Thursday, we spent time with Abraham. We're going to continue the story with Abraham in our Bible study, but we read about a family, a community that is so entrenched in their own family and their own tribe that connections to the outside world are actually dangerous. You actually have to build tight connections and a network of people within your tribe or your community or your family so that you can protect one another from the rest of the globe, from the rest of the nation or the region or whatever it is. And now we're getting into a space where we need to figure out how not to protect ourselves, but how do we continue to build those connections outside of our community? It drives our compassion to hear the stories and the events in lives of other people. It drives our compassion to hear about suffering that is across the globe. Here's an interesting story. It's not really a story so much as a fact. Have you ever watched those donation commercials about a child in Africa that needs you to donate money to help them eat? Yeah, I wasn't going to name them. You're right on. I wasn't going to name them, but sure. So here's what they found, and this is not a negative thing. This is just them doing their job. If you show on a commercial 100 children that are starving and can't eat, the studies actually show that you'll give a certain amount of money. On average, we watch the commercial, we see 100 kids that can't eat, they're starving in their country or whatever, and there's a certain dollar amount of money that you give. If you see one child that is starving and can't eat, you connect with that child, and you are likely, across the average, to give 4 to 5 times more because you saw one child. Now, mathematically, we know it takes a lot more money to feed 100 children than one child, right? And there needs to be a lot more money going to the country if that's the deal. But we've connected with that one child. There's a name. We send a check and we write it for bigger amounts. So they're just doing their job. This is not a negative thing. They're just trying to feed kids. And this is the best way to do it. But we connect to someone on an individual level. And that happens everywhere. So our compassion grows as we identify with stories and learn about people across the world. It is absolutely fascinating to watch how much bigger our world is because of the internet, because of global news, because of all of the things that move us forward and connect us. You are more likely to not go to war with somebody if you trade with them. That makes sense, right? Those little common interactions prevent us from greater amounts of anger. So you look at something like the EU that only 50 years ago, and every year before that, 60 years ago, and every year before that was at war. And now the trade, the borders are open, you connect with different people, you share goods, you share economies, you share all kinds of things. They're not going to war now. And very unlikely that they go to war in the future because it's in everybody's best interest to be connected. That's just a little bit on connection. I want to move us today into two sides of the same coin in terms of being connected. You see, in the life of Jesus, everywhere he went, he was connected to people. In fact, that is, I would say, what makes him unique among those that came before him in the Jewish tradition. It makes him unique in how he approaches faith and how he approaches sharing the love of God. Is that connection with people is absolutely of utmost importance. So everywhere that Jesus goes, he's connecting to someone. He shares water with the woman at the well. He shares a story with people that he's not supposed to be, like, that are like the bad people. He meets with tax collectors and sinners and like everyone that he's not supposed to do. He's out throwing parties with people. At one point, he's sitting down with people, and some Pharisees see this, and they go, "Why is this? Why is this happening? It doesn't even make sense. Why are you doing this? Why are you and your disciples eating with these people? Oh, and why haven't you washed your hands beforehand?" This was part of who Jesus was making those connections and being connected to people everywhere. When we tell the story of Jesus, we tell the story of God with us. We start from the beginning and we talk about God entering into human form and being connected to us in a whole new way, in a way that we can't quite describe. Why does it matter? God is connected to us and understands where we've been as if it took that existence to do that. That's a side point. But we find ourselves more connected and understanding God in that process. There's another side to that. So we ask here, it's not on the board right now, but it's usually up there. It says, exploring God's love together. And there's a together tagline. And then when we flesh that out, we say we want to do that as a community. We want to be connected as we serve. We want to be connected as we worship. And then it says, how does it say? It says, as a family, in our community, something like that. So then we go out and we share that in the world. And this is a huge part of our theology here at Open Door, is being connected, not just inside our doors, but outside our doors. Because this is what Jesus did everywhere he went. When Jesus was asked, what's the most important command? He says, love God. And then secondly, he says, love your neighbor. And they're like, yeah, but what does that really mean? Because in the tribal culture, your neighbor, of course, is part of your community. Well, everyone loves their own child. Mostly. Everyone loves their siblings and their uncles, and mostly. And so Jesus expands neighbor to include basically your enemies also. So anyone and everyone is included. The worst person you can think of is included in neighbor. And he says, connect, love, care for that person. Everywhere we go. Now this is tiresome. You see it for Jesus. You see him experience the nature of this work. And everywhere he goes, he is being connected to people. And then there's one line. Okay, so we hear this long story about what Jesus is doing, and then there's one line, but it shows up over and over and over again. And it says, Jesus withdrew to the mountains. Or Jesus withdrew a stone's throw from his disciples to pray. To be alone. Often the statement is, Jesus went up to the mountainside alone to pray. So this is the difficult one here, because we have a hard time being alone. We do like to be connected, and when we're not connected, we like to have the TV on, or the radio on, or text, or Facebook, or other social media, or a million other ways that we're connected, and it is draining. It drains us to be connected full time. So we're talking here, flip side of the same coin. So on the one hand, Jesus is always in the community, and on the next hand, he is withdrawing to be alone to, connect with God. And we don't know what happens there. My guess is, if I go on my own experience, he's also connecting with nature. He's connecting pieces of life and things that happen when you're alone and you're in solitude. One of the interesting things about the brain, dreams. Now you can have your own opinion on dreams. You don't need to let go of that to deal with this. But dreams, we're starting to learn how they come about in different things. Of course, you're processing things that you've experienced throughout your day. At night, that doesn't go away. You learn new words as a child, you learn new words. They solidify at night as you sleep. Your body needs that time away, that time of rest. And your brain, what we're finding is just, the neurons just fire at random during a certain period of sleep. And they just fire all over the place. And your brain, as this is occurring, because it has less control of what's going on, is trying to make connections between all these random things firing. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes you make a connection at night because of the random nature of the neurons firing that you never would have figured out on your own if you were awake and focused on it. Albert Einstein worked at a patent office. We're sometimes confused on why this is, but one of the statements about him working at this patent office is that he wanted a place that is sort of the status quo, where everything is just moving and flowing, and he's not thinking about his work, and he's not thinking about theories and equations. And in the process of his mind being somewhere else in automatic mode, ideas come to him. I think if we take this time with Jesus where he says, I need to rest, we'll learn a few things. One, your body needs that. You need time to rejuvenate and to refill and to flesh things out. And then secondly, we learn about other things as we are set aside. While our brain is doing nothing or focused on prayer or sitting in silence in meditation, our brain is still working to make connections as we learn and grow and develop. Every once in a while, you wake up from a dream and you realize that the answer to a problem you've been working on is solved in that whatever random firing of things happen. The body continues to make connections. And we need that time of rest. So we're going to look at a couple before I ramble on too much. We're going to look at a couple of these and just hear over and over that Jesus is taking time to be set aside. A preaching tour in Galilee is the title of this heading. It's in Mark chapter 1. And in the morning, verse 35, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place. And there he prayed. Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone is searching for you." And he says, let's go to the neighboring towns. He's moved on. He's been processing things. He's been settled in space and allowing God to speak through him and with him. And I don't know how long they hunted for him. I love that language. They had to hunt for him because he had gone off to solitude and allow his body and his mind to rejuvenate and to be connected to God. Sometimes we think about prayer. We should do a series on prayer at some point. It's really hard because you hear it and you go, that sounds really boring. But sometimes we think about prayer and we think about, well, I don't have anything to say to God. Well, I'm not sure, like how could I spend 20 minutes in prayer alone, quietly? How could, whatever. And prayer has been built into something that we sort of praise people that have these full language of expression of their faith and can pray with big words and flowery language. But that's not what it's about. And when Jesus goes away, he's not spending that time with all kinds of flowery language about how great God is. To be honest, most of it is just pure silence. Just allowing his body to be connected and his mind to be connected to God and to listen and to be present in nature and to be present and connected to the world around him. And in that space, God is able to enter. We don't need the language. But you know what's harder than us speaking for 20 minutes to God? Sitting in silence for 20 minutes. I told you I'm going to do it to you one day, but I just don't know if I can. Commercials are typically 3 minutes long. And if you sit for 3 minutes in silence, so if you just turned that TV off for those 3 minutes, you would get uncomfortable after about 30 seconds. If we turned everything off right now, we would get uncomfortable after about 30 seconds. That's how we're built and wired. It's part of our culture. It's part of society. It's part of what we do. Well, we have a phone in our pocket that can tell us all about our friends right now if we just open it up or turn it on. We have a TV that runs constantly. It used to be, you'd sit down for like the 5 o'clock news or 6 o'clock news. And news just runs 24/7 now. There's this stories, just constant news. That's where we're at. And it's very difficult for us to turn everything off and allow our bodies and our minds to just sit and settle and connect. But this is what Jesus does time and time again. Let's see. Immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone. And the boat, the battered waves, was far away. And then we have the moment of him walking on water. But we skip this moment when Jesus goes off to just sit alone and to be present with God. So on the flip side of Jesus always being in community, he moves directly from crowds to silence, to connect with God, to connect with nature. Have you taken 5 minutes to sit in silence this month? Let's say in a month. No hands. You don't need to share us. How about 10 or 15? When we talk about being connected, it's not just with one another, which it is. We sit at the communion table and we are both connected to one another, but we also are connected to God. Not everyone can start their day with a half-hour meditation or a half-hour of silence or a half-hour of prayer of some sort. But it would change how you experience the next 30 minutes if you did that. A long, long time ago, maybe one of you was here for this, too. A long, long time ago, I did a series on faiths around the world and how we can learn things from different faiths. And one of the ones that we did was look into Islam. And I talked specifically about prayer. And so for a month, I did this in the summer, which I quickly regretted. I woke up and prayed according to the Islamic prayer schedule, which is 5 times a day, which has to happen after sunset and then before and something like that. And so I was up at like 3 a.m. every day to do this, and I used some of the words and some of my own words, but I used the motions, and so your whole body is enmeshed in this prayer. And you repeat the same things over and over and over again. In the process, I was connected to God in a totally new and different way than I had ever done before, just through the process and the full experience of my body. So when we talk about prayer, we talk about sitting and praying. We talk about, even if we go up to the mountain to pray, we're just going to sit and be silent or something like that. But when you experience this prayer, and this is not unique to Islam, this is a practice that also could be looked into our tradition that has your entire body moving with the prayer. You are connected in a new way because it requires all of you. And then at the same time, the words are repetitive, and so your mind just drifts in and out of feeling and experiencing God, and it is a new kind of experience. Jesus goes off to pray, to connect, and to rejuvenate, and to be connected to God, to the land, to himself. And there's a purpose to it. There's a purpose to it because it gives life to him. In the same way that our connection to one another gives life to our community, our connection to God in that space gives life to how we move forward. My guess is if you spend the first 30 minutes of your day in silence, listening, the next 30 minutes, instead of yelling at kids, might be experienced with a calm approach to your kids yelling at you, or whatever it is. Those next moments and the rest of your day is shaped because you have rejuvenated and you have connected in the silence and presence of God. So here's the challenge for the week. Force your brain to take a rest. Force your brain to take a rest. Just like when you literally go to sleep, your brain continues to work and connect yourself to all kinds of things. When you literally take time for silence, your brain, your body, your spirit will be connected to God, to your world in a new way. So try it. Who can try it? No hands, I don't need that. Who can try it? Start with 5. Start with 5 minutes in just silence, listening to the cars on the street, listening to nothingness, listening to the birds. If you can get out to Kanaka Creek, listening to the water flow. Wherever you are, it doesn't have to be anywhere. Life is life, and we experience that in different ways. Wherever it is, take 5 minutes and experience silence, or close to silence. And then, if that goes okay, which it will, don't be scared, take a few more minutes and see how that goes. And you can do this each day, or you can do it once and see how you feel afterward. Or you can do it every day for the rest of your life. No, kidding. You can, of course. But just let your body and your mind rest. See what kinds of connections you make in faith, in God, in your family, in life. And just let that flow in a moment of silence.